Ask them to describe what it feels like, and they will pause. Not because they do not know, because the knowing is stored somewhere that language does not easily reach. They will start a sentence and stop it. They will try a word and reject it. They will look slightly past you the way people look when they are trying to translate something from a language that has no direct equivalent into one that does. And eventually they will say something like free, or present, or just right. And they will know immediately that the word is insufficient, and they will see that you do not fully understand, and they will accept that gap because they have accepted it before. Because here's the thing about people who feel most alive on a motorcycle. They have been trying to explain it their whole riding life. To worried parents and skeptical partners and practical friends who have run the statistics and found the numbers unfavorable, and presented the numbers with the specific confidence of people who believe that a good enough argument should be able to reach anyone. And the rider has heard the argument and understood the argument and been unable to disagree with the argument and gone for the ride anyway. Every time. This is not recklessness. This is not a death wish dressed in leather and rationalized with freedom language. This is something more specific and more interesting and more psychologically revealing than any of those explanations. Because the person who feels most alive on a motorcycle is not running toward death. They are running towards something that life in its ordinary, managed, careful form has stopped providing. Something that the body needs and the mind needs, and that the specific architecture of modern existence has quietly, systematically, almost completely removed. They found it on two wheels, and now everything else is slightly less. Start with what the body experiences in the first 30 seconds after the engine starts. Because this is where the psychology begins, and most people who have never ridden completely miss what is actually happening. The moment a motorcycle begins to move, something changes in the nervous system that is not metaphor. It is measurable and it is immediate, and it is the direct result of a very specific set of demands that the motorcycle places on the human body that almost no other activity places in the same combination. Balance. Constant, active, never delegated balance. One, unlike a car where the vehicle manages its own stability, and the driver is essentially a passenger in a metal box making directional decisions. A motorcycle requires its rider to be a continuous active participant in the basic physics of staying upright. The body is making hundreds of micro adjustments every second, leaning into corners, weighting the pegs, reading the road surface through the handlebars and the seat and the soles of the feet simultaneously. The entire body is engaged, not as a passenger, not as an operator of controls, but as a structural component of the machine itself. This is embodied cognition at its most complete. The rider and the machine are not two separate things in communication. They are a single system. The boundary between the human and the vehicle dissolves in a way that does not happen in a car, does not happen at a desk, does not happen in almost any other context of modern life. The body is not executing instructions from the mind. The body and the mind are operating as a single unit, fully merged, completely present, with no spare capacity for anything else. And this is the first key to understanding why people feel more alive on a motorcycle than anywhere else. Modern life has almost completely separated the body from the mind. Work happens at a screen. Relationships happen through text. Food arrives without hunting. Shelter requires no construction. The physical body, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years as the primary instrument of survival and meaning-making, spends the majority of its time in contemporary life sitting in chairs making small hand movements. Given the profound physical competence that the human body is capable of, the full system engagement that it was built for, goes almost entirely unused in the ordinary day. The motorcycle uses all of it, at once, immediately. And the nervous system, which has been running at 20% capacity in the chair at the desk, suddenly running at full, responds with the only signal appropriate to the situation. This is what it feels like to be completely alive. Now go deeper, because the physical activation is only the first layer. The second layer is attention, and what attention on a motorcycle does to a person is something that cannot be replicated by any mindfulness app or meditation practice or therapeutic intervention that has ever been developed, not because those things do not work, but because they require the person to choose attention, to effortfully direct the mind toward the present moment against its natural tendency to drift toward the past or the future or the ambient noise of everything that needs to be done. On a motorcycle, the choice is not available. You cannot think about the meeting tomorrow when you are leaned over at 40 degrees in a corner with the foot peg a centimeter from the asphalt. You cannot replay the conversation from this morning when the truck in front of you has just changed lanes without signaling, and your entire perceptual system has instantly redirected every available resource toward the calculation of speed and distance and trajectory and response. You cannot worry about the mortgage when the road surface has changed from dry to slightly damp, and you felt it through the front tire before you saw it, and your body is already adjusting before your conscious mind has processed the information. The motorcycle does not give the mind permission to be anywhere except here. Exactly here. This corner. This road. This moment. The here is not optional, and it is not a practice. It is a condition of survival. And the mind, which spends the majority of its existence in other times and other places and other versions of reality, suddenly and completely and without effort arrives in the present tense. Psychologists call this state flow, the complete absorption of attention in an activity that is demanding enough to require everything and skilled enough to be navigated, and the state where the self-monitoring voice goes quiet, where time distorts, where the ordinary background noise of anxiety and regret and anticipation and self-evaluation simply stops because there is no bandwidth left for it. Writers do not chase flow. Flow is the standard condition of writing. It is not the reward. It is the baseline. And when they come home and sit in the chair and the mind floods back with everything it was holding before the ride, the contrast is not subtle. This is what they mean when they say everywhere else feels like less. Here is the third layer. And this is where it gets genuinely dark and genuinely true in a way that most people who love writers have always sensed but never been able to articulate. The person who feels most alive on a motorcycle is not just seeking flow. They are seeking themselves. Specifically, they are seeking the version of themselves that only exists on the bike. The one that does not exist at the desk, or in the meeting, or at the dinner table, or in the role that the day requires them to occupy. The one that is not someone's employee, or someone's partner, or someone's parent, or someone's child. The one that is just a body and a machine and a road and a set of skills that belong entirely and completely to them. Modern identity is almost entirely relational. We are who we are in the context of other people. The job defines us. The relationship defines us. The social role, the reputation, the history, the set of expectations that other people carry about who we are and how we behave and what we are likely to do in any given situation. All of it shapes the person we are when other people are present. And that shaping is not always a distortion. Often it is genuine. Often the relational self is the real self. But it is never the complete self. There is always something that the roles do not contain. Something that the expectations do not account for. Something that exists in the person that has no place in the ordinary structure of their daily identity, that is too raw or too fast or too unmanaged, or simply too much for the context that their life provides. The motorcycle gives that part somewhere to go. On the bike, there is no role to maintain, no version of themselves to manage for an audience, no gap between who they are and who they are presenting. The physical demands of riding are so total that performance is not possible. You cannot perform on a motorcycle, you can only be. And for people who have spent significant portions of their lives performing, adjusting, calibrating, managing the distance between their interior experience and their exterior presentation, the impossibility of performance is not a limitation. It is the most profound relief available. This is why writers often describe the bike not as something they do, but as something they are. Not a hobby, not a vehicle, a context in which they exist more fully than they exist anywhere else. A place where the person they actually are and the person they appear to be collapse into the same person entirely. And then the ride ends, and the distance opens again, and everything else resumes, and they understand in the specific way that people understand things that can only be felt rather than explained. Why they will be back on the bike as soon as they can manage it. Now examine the relationship between the motorcycle and risk, because this is where most people on the outside get it wrong and where the psychology becomes most interesting. The people who worry about riders almost always frame the risk as the problem, as the irrational element. as the thing that needs to be explained away or minimized, or eventually overcome by sufficient maturity or sufficient love or sufficient awareness of what there is to lose. They have the relationship backward. For many writers, the risk is not the problem. The risk is the point. Not because they want to be injured, not because they are indifferent to their own survival, but because risk, genuine risk, the kind that the body registers as real rather than theoretical, it does something to human consciousness that safety cannot do. It makes the present moment undeniable. This requires some history to understand properly. The human nervous system evolved in an environment of genuine physical risk. Predators, exposure, scarcity. The physical world was dangerous in ways that required constant alertness, constant engagement, constant full system activation just to navigate an ordinary day. And the experience of managing that risk successfully, of meeting a genuine physical challenge and surviving it with skill and attention, and the full deployment of every capability the body and mind possessed, produced in the human organism a specific neurological signature, a cocktail of neurochemicals, adrenaline and norepinephrine sharpening perception and accelerating reaction time, a dopamine rewarding the successful navigation, endorphins completing the circuit. That neurological signature is what the body knows as fully alive. Contemporary life has almost completely eliminated the conditions that produce it. The physical world has been made safe. The risks that remain are largely abstract. Financial risk, social risk, reputational risk. These are real and they produce their own stress responses. But they do not produce the specific signature of genuine physical risk met and navigated in real time by a skilled and present body. The motorcycle produces it, reliably, every ride. This is not addiction in the pathological sense. This is a nervous system finding the conditions it was built for in the one context that modern life has not yet fully managed and sanitized and made completely safe. The rider is not broken, and the rider is calibrated to a standard that the rest of their life no longer meets. There is one more layer, the one nobody says out loud but that every serious rider knows somewhere below the level of words. The motorcycle could kill them. They know this, not abstractly, not statistically. In the immediate physical way that the body knows things that matter. Every time they ride somewhere in the system, that knowledge is present. Not as fear exactly, not as recklessness either, as a kind of clarifying pressure that does something to consciousness that nothing else does. It makes everything else smaller. If the meeting that felt impossibly important this morning feels different after an hour on a twisting road where the margin for error was real, and they operated inside it with skill and attention and the full weight of their own capability. The anxiety that was running at the back of the mind before the ride has not disappeared, but it has been put in its proper proportion. The things that were consuming all available attention have been briefly, completely displaced by the only thing that was actually happening, which was the road and the bike and the body managing both. This is what writers mean when they say the bike puts everything in perspective. Not that it makes problems disappear, that it restores the correct scale of things, that it reminds the nervous system what actual urgency feels like, which makes most of the things that we're presenting as urgent reveal themselves as something considerably smaller. The bike does not solve the problems waiting at home, but it returns the rider to those problems as a different person. A person who has spent an hour being completely alive in a way that requires everything and produces nothing except the experience of their own competence and presence and full system engagement. A person who, for the duration of the ride, was not managing their life but living it directly, without mediation, without buffer, without the careful distance between experience and self that the rest of their existence maintains. The people who worry about riders are not wrong to worry. The risk is real. The statistics are what they are. There is no argument against the numbers that fully resolves the numbers. But the people who worry are also missing something. They are looking at the risk and seeing only what could be lost. They are not seeing what has already been lost in the life that the bike interrupts. The slow, managed, careful diminishment of full aliveness that happens when every environment in a person's life is safe and optimized and free from genuine challenge. The specific kind of dying that happens not in a moment but across years, gradually in the accumulation of days that were fine and appropriate and completely sufficient, and somehow, underneath all of that sufficiency, not quite enough. The writer is not indifferent to what they have to lose. They are exquisitely aware of what they have to lose. That awareness is, in the most literal sense, what the ride produces. The full system consciousness of being alive right now, on this road, in this body, with these skills, in this moment that will not come again and is happening completely and cannot be anything other than exactly what it is. That is not nothing. For some people, it is the most important thing. The bike does not make them reckless. The bike makes them present. And being present for people who spend most of their lives everywhere except here is not an ordinary experience. It is the whole point.